You could call me a poet, but that's not all I am. I'll sing you a song with a big bad band. I'll give you brain tingles and twitchy fingers while the questions bloom out my mouth. I'll teach while I learn about this lion city where I come from. It's always new to me.
What is literature? To break it down, it represents the culture and traditions of a people in words. Here, we're talking about Singapore literature, or Singlit.
One thing I know about Singlit is it's constantly changing and evolving, just like this sunny island. Whether it's telling stories out loud and proud, or illustrations, or even through rhythm and rhyme, we find out how Singapore literature, Singlit, allows us to preserve our country's rich historical and cultural heritage through the magic of words. Six years ago, Jumaini Ariff started writing when she could not find suitable books in Bahasa Melayu for her children.
Back then, when they were much younger, there were very little local Malay language books, and there was a high volume of translated books. Red Riding Hood is basically Red Riding Hood. It should not be Buddha in red tudung. You know, it's just odd. For them, they couldn't accept that. So I figured, fine, I'll write for you. And that's what I did.
Jumaini has written 9 books, some of which have been translated into English and Arabic. These books have also been used as teaching materials in schools. In 2014, Jumaini was invited by the Singapore Book Council to conduct storytelling sessions with a new persona. That's how Nek Selampit, or the folktale storyteller, came to life and started gaining popularity. These days, Jumaini performs in both English and Malay, locally and overseas.
Nek Selampit champions folktale storytelling, especially in Bahasa Melayu, which Malay language. When we storytell as a persona instead of myself, children at large would feel transported into another era.
Awak suka makan ayam? You 喜欢 chicken 吗？你不喜欢啊 you don't like 啊
Jumaini sees herself as an educator for her mother tongue, which is why she was proud to be appointed a Duta Bahasa, or language ambassador, for the official Malay Language Month in 2017.
They felt that it's wonderful to celebrate a person who uses Bahasa Melayu to entice the children to fall in love with the Malay language and Malay stories. It's actually also a means to reach out even further to my community, and that's important because Malay language needs that kind of role model.
Am I a horse? Am I a donkey? Who knows? One of Jumaini's current pet projects is a YouTube channel where she vlogs regularly and uploads new stories. Her daughter, Humaira, or Nek Selampit Jr., started performing with her mother 7 years ago.
My audience base are preschoolers, primary schoolers, or even secondary schoolers. And because of that, I do invest a lot of time to make props where the scene can come alive.
Sounds like I get to help you out with something.
Yes, definitely. We'll put you to work.
Maybe I can practice my storytelling skills.
Perhaps. So you will be making a bush. Great.
Weird shaped bush.
Oh, any way you like it.
You know, in this day and age, children are really struggling with their attention spans with the iPads and the phones. So how do you keep the attention of the kids?
We definitely leverage on the fact that we're very good with our facial expressions, and we basically can easily come up with tunes just to entice the children to just be a part of our telling. We invite them to come on board.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of our strategies. Humaira, what role will you be playing in the story later?
I will be playing Pak Belang, the tiger.
Ah, the tiger. What shall we give Auntie Deborah? What did you teach your play?
Bees.
Oh, well, that's perfect, because my name means bee. I'm excited to be a part of this.
Today we have a special guest storytelling with us, Auntie Deborah. Hi. I love to sing this one particular song, which is my special song, the Kanchill song, and I'm going to sing it for you. La, 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 la.
I believe that we are a culture of our own and we have to be proud of what we write. We carry this uniqueness that nowhere else exists, and I think it's worth celebrating and definitely fighting for.
I've been so inspired today by what Jumaini, Humaira, and Raiz are doing. They're a family of storytellers and they do everything themselves. They make the props and the costumes and even the filming to make storytelling videos. I've really learned some skills. I might just even use them in my own craft.
This one, multitasking elephant. Tasking meaning task.
Oh, multitasking.
This guy produced the popular Singapore comic strip, The House of Lim. It ran for 8 years in a local newspaper. People called it the Chinese Brady Bunch, with some grandparents thrown in.
CNA started his craft when he was hired as a cartoonist by a local paper in the early 80s after he sent in samples of his work. A year into the job, he was asked to create a daily cartoon strip, which eventually became a household name. His latest work is now syndicated and even runs in Brunei and Bangladesh.
Moody and Salty was derived from Billy and Salty, which was based in Australia. But when my strip moved to Brunei, I moved the crocodile to Borneo, and I talk about wildlife conservation. Hopefully, it'll gain a lot of readership.
Yeah, some more awareness.
Exactly, yes.
CNA's love for illustration started young, where his doodles filled up pages. As a cartoonist, his motto is that a drawing should tell a story. These days, he is trying his hand at being a graphic novelist.
On a day-to-day basis.
The taglines or the text of your comics, how does that come to you?
You imagine a scenario, but you have this punchline in your head. So you're going to surprise the reader. You have to build it up. So you actually have to work backward.
CNA is going to teach me how to work his magic pen. Right.
Yes.
So what's your process like?
Well, I usually start thinking of an idea, and after having it, I'll put it down in my book. This one, multitasking elephant. Tasking
Sounds
meaning
comical.
task.
Multitasking.
I'll just write down our theme first. And I have two characters in here. One is the boy in my strip, Budi, and perhaps I'll show the elephant doing things with his tusks. Maybe flipping over a log, carrying a briefcase, and carrying the boy in the other tusk. And then he's doing something else, maybe flipping a log. So I'll let you fill in the last panel, which maybe involves the elephant carrying the boy, giving him a lift somewhere.
All right, let's try. Let's see how... My elephant looks weird, man.
So a lot of times in my strip, my character talks to the reader and just explaining the punchline.
Ah.
Singapore history and culture can be found in his work, but not before he adds some wit and nuance to it. Like in 2014, when he published his first graphic novel, The Bicycle, inspired by his father's life and stories during World War II. His latest graphic novel, Terumbu, is a tale of romance and piracy set in mid-19th century Singapore. Both The Bicycle and Terumbu are historical speculative fiction, drawn in a noirish format.
I've always done serious comics before I did cartoon. It's a different genre actually. I took a year off to do The Bicycle and it came out all right. And then I did another one I might eventually give up culture. That's more stress than doing one graphic novel. Despite having more islands than the Caribbean, there are no pirate stories here. The Orang Laut, the Sea Gypsies, nobody's written anything about the culture. I hope more Singaporean writers will explore this angle, because if you popularize it, you make it known to the world, and then that's where you generate more interest in the region.
So what I find really interesting is how CNAIN takes the old and mixes it with the new to create revitalized stories from our culture. He's really like a culture recreator, a really amazing example of it.
দুঃখিত, আপনাদের পরিচ্ছন্ন দেয়ালে রং তুলি দিয়ে আঁকা চিত্রটি ঝুলিয়ে দেওয়ার জন্য দুঃখিত। নামিয়ে নেব এক্ষুনি। চিত্রকর্মটির বিষয় পরবাস, নাম সুখ পাখি।
Like many of his countrymen, Bangladeshi poet Zakir Hossain Kokan left his parents, wife, and child to come to work in Singapore in 2003.
Back home, you were a journalist, and then suddenly when you were here, you were sweeping HDB floors. How did poetry help you to transition through that change?
When I came here as a migrant worker, that was very shock for me. Sometimes I cannot hear surrounding what going on. Sometimes my supervisor, they give some advice, also I cannot hear properly. I was fall in mental sickness. Only when I start read poetry and write poetry again in Singapore, that actually slowly recover me. From very childhood, when I start my high school, I start writing poetry. My experience in my country and totally different when I come in Singapore as a migrant worker here. So these all are affected my writing way in Singapore.
In 2014, Zakir entered the inaugural Migrant Worker Poetry Competition. One of the organizers was Shivaji Das, a Singapore-based management consultant and author.
In Singapore, as well as in other countries, there were a few initiatives around migrant workers, but many of them had the donor-recipient kind of structure, as in the migrant workers were given a free meal once in a year. But what we wanted to do was to give the migrant workers a voice themselves and hear them out, like what do they feel and what kind of issues they have.
Zakir won the poetry competition 2 years in a row in 2014 and 2015.
Some audience asked me, how could migrant worker can write very depth and meaningful poems? Then I asked to them, why not? Migrant workers are human beings. As a poet, they can catch the emotion and the scenery, and they can bring these things in the poem. Why not? So after that poetry competition, we try to make a good bonding with poetry with local and migrants. Welcome everyone to our event. So we're going to book launch today here.
First, I give my colleague the book, then they come feedback me, pro writing good. Then my boss come call me, hey, why you never give me book? You give always friend.
Zakir has become an important voice for migrant workers. In between organizing book launches and editing poetry anthologies, he also recently helped plan the first ever Migrant Workers Photography Festival.
It has brought the voice of a very unique socio-economic and sort of a racial class as well into the forefront of our cultural scene.
There's such a large migrant worker population, and for us to be able to hear their voices is necessary.
Yeah.
In 2017, Zakir launched a project called One Bag, One Book to encourage migrant workers to read more.
Every day when migrant workers go for work, they bring one bag, right? What have inside the bag? Food, water bottle, umbrella, clothes. When I ask them, hey, please, can you bring one book? They say, where got time, Zakir, for reading book? I say, hey, cool down, cool down. You can read every day one page. Is it very hard for you? They say, no, yeah, we can read at least one page. প্রতিদিন এক পৃষ্ঠা করে পড়া যাবে সময় আছে আপনাদের মানে যখন কাজে যান আপনারা কাজ থেকে ফিরেন প্রতিদিন জাস্ট এক পৃষ্ঠা
When he first started this project, Zakir bought 250 books in Bangladesh with his own money. Now, members of the public have started donating English books to this cause.
So Zakir's done this in a really organized fashion. He's got this flyer, and the flyer has information about how to contact him when the workers are done reading the book and exchange it with him for a new book. Zakir is an energetic powerhouse. He genuinely cares about bridging the gap between local and migrant communities and about promoting the joy of reading to workers all over the island. I'm really glad he exists. We're going to write some poetry and perform it at Spoke and Bird. Welcome to Spoke and Bird! What are words worth? If you've ever wondered how a poem is put together, you've come to the right place. I'm about to show you how.
Spoken Bird is a monthly poetry open mic event that provides a space for emerging writers and first-timers to perform their work. It was founded in 2017 by Stephanie Dogfoot, a Singaporean performance poet.
So I started Spoken Bird because I realized there was not that many poetry open mics in Singapore, and I thought that poets in Singapore needed one to sort of express themselves, develop their writing, develop their performance skills as well. So I thought I'd create it and see what would happen.
Stephanie has been writing poetry since the age of 7 and has performed in 16 different countries and at the famous Glastonbury Festival in 2013. She also won multiple poetry slams in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. This is competitive performance poetry, where poems are judged by randomly chosen members from the audience.
For a long time, I was inspired by sort of like memories from childhood, from growing up. Then it became memories from living overseas. Now I think I'm trying to write more about, I guess, things that are happening to me.
She's a poet, I'm a poet. We're gonna write some poetry and perform it at Spoke and Bird. If you could say anything, what would you say? Why are you fighting?
Don't make assumptions, people.
What's the process like for you to write?
It differs from poem to poem, but usually it's when I get an idea or get a line that gets stuck in my head. Sometimes I'll listen to a song and I'll really want to recreate the sort of feeling I get from the song, or I want to develop an idea or a memory further.
Hey, maybe this is the poem here. Shall we go with that? What do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Be meta. Kind of
Yeah,
meta.
yeah. So, this is what we got right now. The poem working title is called If You Could Say Anything. So what advice do you have for someone who wants to start performing?
First of all, just do it. Don't worry about being ready or asking for advice. By doing it, you're already braver than a lot of people. If you could say anything for the whole country to hear.
So, how are you feeling?
I feel good. I'm excited. Excited, a bit stressed. We're going to start in about 5 minutes.
You want to do it again?
Yeah, right. Why? This is very stiff.
All right, welcome to Spoke and Bird. So yeah, it's so good to see so many people out here from poetry
country. So make some noise for the one and only Cyril Wong.
Headlining this spoken bird open mic night is Cyril Wong, one of Singapore's most popular contemporary poets. He's won the Singapore Literature Prize twice.
Between nowhere and everywhere, I remember I don't have many years left in the country, moving too fast to remember an old fool like me. I look out the window.
Singlit means a collection of different voices from Singapore, about Singapore, and also about the world through the perspective of a Singaporean. I love performing at open mic nights because it allows me to interact with people in a very personal and honest and sincere way, especially with other poets and readers.
And stretch, unfold your joints wide into that absence here.
Turn into that sweet and sour, yet I don't know what.
It's very interesting and an eye-opening experience. And I felt really happy that I could showcase my 2 poems that I wrote about a few weeks ago.
It's almost a paradox because writers are very introverted very often, but writing has actually brought me closer to lots of people and helped me meet lots of new people as well. And so I think it's definitely taught me to come out of my shell, to be less judgmental of myself and of other people.
We have a very special Deborah Emmanuel.
If you could say anything, if I could say anything, I would say I'm not actually qualified for this. If I could say anything.
I had a really beautiful time here today at Spoken Bird. It's so important that spaces like this exist where all kinds of people can come and take their hearts out of their chest and put them on the stage. Singapore literature writes our Singapore identity into tangible existence. When we see local characters centered in our red dot, dealing with issues that are relevant to us, it helps us to understand ourselves and our society just a little bit better. When I write, I create a universe to share with others. When I read, a part of me I never knew starts to bloom. Words bring life. Words birth stories. This episode, we've seen that Singapore literature is above all a kind of storytelling. I'm so happy I got to share these Singapore stories with you.